Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very senior corporate leader and author from London, UK, Mr. Piers Fallowfield-Cooper. Piers, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Ashutosh. Nice to be here.
Thank you. Piers is a CEO mentor, a board facilitator, and leadership coach, and he's an author. And all of you know, I'm always very partial to authors. So he's an author of a book titled, Are You Still the Future? And we'll talk about his book. Piers has over 30 years experience as a senior executive, having held various MD, president, CEO, and chairman roles in finance, fintech, and e-publishing. And he's been described by a number 10 insider as the anti-establishment coach. Wow, that's fantastic. So Piers, before we get into talking about your book, tell me a little bit about your own amazing journey.
That's a wonderful, big, open question. I think when we think about journeys, we've got the kind of big life journey.
Correct.
Then it's interesting. Different histories, different cultures, different places have different concepts of how life is, some religious, spiritual. So the Saxons, who were our forebears here in the UK, had this idea of the Great Hall because they lived together in, particularly rich families in great halls. And their idea was that life was the time when the bird flew in at one end of the hall and enjoyed the life and then flew out through the other. Yep. So I think we've got this big idea of life and then down to our different things in our life. So I had a happy but unusual childhood, and I'm moderately dyslexic, which has given me both advantages and disadvantages, as you could imagine. But overall, I've just had such a happy life.
Wonderful.
And such a wonderful life. And whilst I'm very well paid for the work I do, I'm able to contribute back and do very fulfilling work. So I'm truly blessed and very fortunate.
How wonderful. Thank you. So let's now talk about your book, Are You Still the Future? And before I ask you about the book, I'm going to ask all our viewers and listeners to go and check out the book, Are You Still the Future? By Mr. Piers Fallowfield-Cooper. I'll go and check it out myself. So my first question to you, Piers, is can you tell me a little bit about your book?
Perfect. So I resisted what most authors do of having hundreds of them stacked on the shelf.
Okay.
Which is the usual way. So I guess one of the questions is, you have many famous people on your podcast, so why bother with this, I suppose, is the underlying question. What I've tried to do is encapsulate 30 plus years of learning as a CEO into the book, and also my 20 plus years coaching and mentoring, because I've had a unique view into working with some of the most successful and cleverest people in the world.
Correct.
And I've tried to instill this, but also to bring it down to a series of principles that are useful to people. So my big philosophy is very simple. The big philosophy is about how to remain relevant. Okay? So for me, as a coach and mentor, the secret for me is to be interesting and interested.
Correct.
I always like to try and distill things right down. So for me, it's about being interesting, so people look forward to spending time with me, and interested in the person I'm working with. So in this book, there's a number of principles like this. So I think for most people, they should be thinking about how they remain relevant.
Correct.
And, we're in a time of great change. So that there's some very big fundamental principles, which are about being adaptable, being adoptable. And at the end of each chapter, there's a little piece called Piers in Your Pocket. This was written for a client of mine who said, what I want is Piers in my pocket.
Amazing.
So just to try and give people these solid little building blocks,
Mm.
if that makes sense.
Very interesting. Very, very interesting. You talk about the concept of the future and how it has evolved over time. Help me understand, what are your perspectives of the future and how it is changing?
So the great Yogi Berra, the American baseball coach, who, if anybody wants 15 minutes of fun, just read his quotes. I mean, he's wonderful. Said, "Oh, predictions very difficult, especially about the future." So we're in dangerous ground. But let's think back a little bit. You and I are both old enough to remember when a man landed on the moon.
Absolutely.
Oh, you know, we watched it and it was just quite amazing. Would you have imagined that 30, 40 years after that, you would have had more computing power in your pocket than was used to get a man to the moon and back? Would you imagine that?
Yep.
You know?
It's completely agree.
It's just, you know, and so I think it depends on where we look. The other thing about the future is it tends not to be incremental. It tends not to be like a simple path. When you look at children growing up, it's not a gradual path. It's suddenly they go up a step and then run and then another step. And I watched my parents. They didn't sort of gradually just decline. They kind of stepped down to a slightly slower, gentler level. So I think one of our challenges is about trying to spot which are going to be the big game shifters. Now, at the moment, everybody's talking about ChatGPT.
Correct.
We've had machine learning and a degree of artificial intelligence for some time, but I think we've just hit the Netscape moment. You remember when Netscape suddenly, you and I were being exposed to, there's data out there if only we can find it on the web. And you had to type incredibly long, and then Netscape came and boom, we got a way in. So I think suddenly we're seeing a way in that's going to be a big shift. A very big shift. There are some terrible things happening. A war in Ukraine. I would not have expected a war on my doorstep. You know, so we don't know what's going to happen, and then suddenly it does. So I'm very, very cautious about predicting the future. And if I might add, I never use goal setting with my clients, which is a bit of a shocking thing, because the client can only imagine from the place they are now.
Correct.
So the goals they set are from here, not what could be. So I'm a huge fan of getting directionality right and then dealing with what comes up.
Great response. Thank you. You also speak about the importance of questioning the assumptions we hold about the future. Tell me about one or two of the assumptions that you challenge.
Well, the first assumption is it's going to be more of the same.
Okay.
You know, we think it's going to be sort of bigger, better, brighter, smaller, darker, lighter than the same. And it's not. It isn't. We saw in the pandemic how that was such a major reset for so many people, a complete reset, where we've moved from, would you want to be a property developer owning lots of offices at the moment? Probably not. Whereas 5 years ago, that was a wonderful business to
Correct. Correct.
Yeah? So things come along. And I think the key for us is, how do we respond to them? How do we adapt? You know, that's the more interesting question for me, which then comes down to, how are we as a person in the world, which is a much more exciting thing.
Interesting. We just spoke very briefly about ChatGPT, and technology is certainly impacting our future. You know, I remember when I was very, very young, we just had those mechanical typewriters and the rotary dial phones. And in the last 4 decades, everything has changed. How do you see technology impacting and understanding the future? And how should we prepare?
Well, it's interesting. I'm writing as I think is everybody else at the moment, a big piece on this. Now, we have to remember that the word robot is a Czech word, and it was in the 1920s in a play, and the play was about artificial beings that man had created that then took over and decided that they knew best. So, you know, we've been with this for a long time. We've experienced Arnie as the Terminator, you know. We've had R2-D2 and C3PO. And often, as you know, with technology, if you've got that wonderful system that comes from Apple, I won't mention its name because otherwise devices will probably go off everywhere. But, you know, they sell you R2-D2, who's going to do all these wonderful things, but, sorry, C3PO, who's going to do all these wonderful things. But actually, R2-D2 turns up, you know, not quite as clever as we hope. So we never know quite which way it's going to go. I think the biggest shift is going to be that, for example, call centers will become completely automated.
Correct.
Already when I call the bank, I'm now recognized on voice recognition. And interestingly, things like ChatGPT might undermine that particular technology as it's able to replicate. So a lot of the very basic tasks, and personally, whilst I like talking to a human, I'd rather have an accurate answer from a bot than an inaccurate answer from a person. So it's up to us then to make sure that our human qualities that we can bring, that we hone them. Okay? You can't fight the machine. You'll never learn as many different responses as the machine can learn from the data. You have to work out a way to bring your humanity. Yes, all the things that you can be, your warmth, your personality, your empathy, all those kind of things. Your ability to explain. You know, I've seen technical people who have the ability to communicate well just shoot to the top. Because to have a strong technical skill and the ability to communicate, those kind of things are very valuable. So don't try and be smarter than the machine. Bring all the things the machine can't bring.
Well said. You also talk about the power of being adaptable and resilient in the face of uncertainty. Help me understand what you mean, and you know, for a lot of our young viewers and listeners, whether you have any thoughts about how one can stay adaptable and resilient.
So here's the thing. You and I are chatting now. We're very relaxed. We're not under threat. The world kind of throws stuff at us. So let's talk first of all in a conceptual way and then a practical way.
Right.
So in a conceptual way, there's a whole interesting set of knowledge around what's called the embodied experience. So how we feel physically in our bodies, how we're comfortable or uncomfortable, is often how we experience the world. So, you know, the world, how we experience it changes on how we are. So the first thing we can do is all the things that are good for us, which are we eat well, you know, we get some exercise, we get some fresh air, we get a chance to have some quiet time, all those practical building blocks. But then I was taught as a child, if you fall over, you stand up, you dust your knees down, you wipe your face and your tears, and you get on with it.
Correct.
So we have to have that, okay, so what's next? Yeah, we have to have that what's next. Now, I would say, and particularly to our younger viewers, stuff's going to come up. You're going to get tripped up. And by the way, in the moment, you won't necessarily have access to your incredible best resources. Just do the best you can. Face the direction you're supposed to be going.
Correct.
Take a breath. Have a go. The world curiously rewards people who have a go. You know, I don't know if it's karma. I don't know if it's luck. I don't know what it is.
But
But generally, the world rewards us if we, you know what, I'll go and give it another go. So it served me well.
Absolutely.
It served me well.
Yeah.
Humor, enthusiasm, optimism, these are good characteristics to have.
Interesting. You also speak about intergenerational collaboration. And I wanted to get, given the gap that seems to be developing between different age groups, both in terms of perspectives and thinking, how do you think different generations can come together to achieve an inclusive and sustainable future?
Look for the best. So my entire philosophy is work with what's working. Yeah, that's my entire philosophy. Work with what's working and do more of it. So interestingly, a client told me a story yesterday. It was a classic it was a classic learning situation where it could have just missed, but actually came together. So young apprentices were learning how to do this, how to change a thing, and the older ones said, "Oh, you have to do this and you do that." You know, it's a wonderful sharing of knowledge. And then it was, "Oh yes, if you look in the manual," they can almost tell you, look in the manual, but page about 400, there's a piece on there and you'll see and the sequence putting the nuts back on. And then one of them said, you know, why don't we make a video? Why don't we make a YouTube video of you telling us how to do it? Oh, and they did it. And within a couple of months, the CFO had been persuaded to buy everybody tablets full of these shared knowledge. So I talk about in the book this idea of through the other end of the telescope. What's it look like from the other end? So try and understand what it looks like from the other end. And avoid stereotypes, you know. If anybody else tells me Generation Z is a bunch of snowflakes, I'm going to scream. They're not. They just see the world differently and think differently.
Correct.
And by the way, I think it's a generation when the gears come together, and they will, when the gears come together, they're going to be wonderful. They're our future. They are going to be so driven to do what's right.
Correct.
It's quite amazing.
Absolutely.
So I object strongly to this dismissal of different generations. And the youngsters, be careful. You know, those who came before you have a lot to share with you. Ask, you know, build the relationship.
I agree completely. And I'm completely in agreement with what you're saying. I think the young leaders, the millennials and the Gen Z leaders have brought in a breath of fresh air and a completely different perspective to almost every organization today, you know. So, but you're absolutely right. My next question to you, Piers, is what role do you think empathy, compassion, and understanding play in navigating the challenges and uncertainties that we are likely to face?
Brilliant question. Along with being able to read the signals in the system, I think this is the way you unlock the future. As we talked about a little bit at the beginning, this idea that humans have this quality of empathy, of relationship, of these kinds, which machines generally don't. I'm sure they'll learn something similar, and they'll learn to smile or purr at us or something. So I would say, read the signals in the system, you know, scan for it, and then look for opportunities where you can connect, where you can build relationships, where you can use empathy. I did a master's degree in coaching and organizational consulting some years ago. And I'd been doing the work for a long time, but I thought, you know, really, you should go and do a program. And I wanted to see it from beginning to end and what I might learn.
Right.
80% of it I knew. Of the other 20%, 80% was okay. But every now and again, there were incredible little gems that made the 2 years and the fee worth it? And one of the little gems was around what made a hugely successful coaching mentoring relationship. So we all thought, oh, it's the coach, it's the quality of the questions, it's the way we work. No, there were three key things. And the research had been done more in the world of counseling. So it was people who were more stressed than the group I usually do. But the data is relevant. There was there a support network outside of this relationship? So when they left, were there other people to encourage them? What was the quality of the relationship built between, the coach client? And what was the willingness to engage? So really, it's about how can you engage? How can you connect? And empathy, of course, as we know, understanding someone else's position is the way that people connect.
Well said, well said. So Piers, I have time for 2 more questions. Okay. My next question is that, were there any personal experiences or anecdotes that were pivotal in shaping your views on the future and its implications for society?
I had a near-death experience as a 10-year-old, which has been a lens through. Most 10-year-olds don't know they're going to die. 30-year-olds don't know they're going to die. They understand it's a concept, unless they a death very close to them of a family member, or they've fallen off a roof or something. It's an intellectual concept.
Absolutely.
But I was very, very aware of my mortality, and incredibly grateful that I didn't die. So my lens has always been one of optimism and possibility. So that shaped my worldview.
Amazing.
Also, my dyslexia. I'm moderately intuitive as a person, and my dyslexia means that I have to fill in the missing gaps sometimes. I'm quite good at reading the signals and getting it, but then I make sure empirically I check, is what I've just kind of thought, is that real, or is that me making things up? So that had a strong impact. The other thing is, I have a huge belief in human potential, both as a species, but individually. And I've seen worlds open up for people with different questions, with spending a little time. A young entrepreneur who I sent a copy of the book to, he wrote to me, and you could tell he was writing as he was reading it, because he got another note, little text. Oh, this bit's really good. And then, and then he came back and said, do you know what? Your book has really given me hope.
Amazing.
And,
amazing.
To be able to do these kind of things in the world, Ashok, from your work. It's a gift. It's a gift to us that we can make the gift.
Correct. Very well said. And what a powerful comment to come back to an author. Fantastic. And my last question to you, Piers, now, and you just told me about one reader who said that your book gave him hope. What do you hope that your readers will take away from Are You Still the Future?
So one very, very, very successful lady who read the book said, reading this book is like having a mentor in your pocket. This is Margaret Heffernan, who's a very famous author. Piers has worked with so many different people in such a range of businesses and predicaments, accumulated enormous wisdom and insight. Best of all, he shares this with warmth and humanity, not the cold abstractions of business strategy. I can't think of anybody who wouldn't find pearls of wisdom of great use to them in this treasure trove. So, that's what I hope. I hope people get a little insight, a thought, an idea, because we have to remember that in many ways we circle a planet like being in an orbit.
Yep.
And so we get more and more of the same as we go round and round. So what we want to do is get a little nudge so that then we can break free of that particular orbit and find a different orbit. So if I can give someone a little nudge to get a different orbit, then I'm very happy.
How amazing. And on that note, Piers, thank you so much for speaking to me about your own journey. I mean, I loved what you told me about when you started, about the need to be interesting and interested. I think that was such a powerful set of 2 words that you gave me. Thank you for talking to me about your book, Are You Still the Future? Thank you for so many different aspects and perspectives you gave me on how one can look at the future, though I completely agree no one can really predict the future. Thank you also for talking to me about so many different aspects that the young people can take away from your book. I'm sure there will be an opportunity to speak to you again sometime about you as a coach, because I'm sure there must be a lot of value you must be bringing to your coachees as well. But for this particular session, thank you so much for speaking to me, and good luck.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you so much, Ashutosh. And I really appreciate the work you're doing and your mission to spread knowledge into the world. I really appreciate it. And thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for The Brand Called You.